Woo! Greetings, everybody. This is your literate pal Malcolm Tent here, bringing you this week's episode of Tent Talks Tunes. Yes. Every single week I like to come on here live on the dreaded Facebook, social media, baby, and talk about music. And then when I'm done, I like to archive the episode on my Facebook page, and I like to archive it on my YouTube channel. So that's it. It's on my permanent record. There is no running, no hiding, no escaping from it. When I say it, it goes out there. And until the sun goes supernova and swallows the earth up and reduces it to a cinder, my words are on the permanent record forever. Kind of like a book. Look at this. This is the biggest book I've got in my entire library. The Webster's Third New International Dictionary. This thing probably weighs about 400 pounds. It's massive. Books are cool. I like books an awful lot, and that's why we're going to talk about books today. Not the dictionary necessarily, but music. It's going to tie into the entire aesthetic of Tent Talks Tunes, baby. Literacy and rock and roll do go together. Marvin Haywood would probably agree with that. Old-time trashy RoboPuff Law would probably agree with that. And hopefully you will agree with it as well. If not, it's alright. We just take the book and drop it. Whew, that is 75 pounds of dictionary. I got tired of holding on to that thing. But first, we're going to talk about the mail I've gotten in the last week. Some pretty cool things in the mail. I love it when people send me mail. I got to admit that. If you've seen this Tent Talks Tunes thing a few times, you know I just love my mail. I love sending things to people as well. So it's a bit of reciprocity we've got here. And reciprocity is a word that I saw in that dictionary I just threw on the ground. So if you want to get reciprocal and send me something, here's my address. P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. Send me something. I'll probably send you something back. My mommy down in South Florida saw that I had an address in a P.O. box, so she sent me a Christmas card. That was very nice. Thanks, Mommy. She also was watching an episode of Tent Talks Tunes where I talked about my love of numismatics. See, that's in that dictionary as well that I threw to the ground. So she sent me a coin. My mom, in the mail, sent me a coin. And this is an actual coin from my childhood, and there's no way you're actually going to see what's up with this thing because my camera's so crappy. And by the way, I got the word that a brand new camera is waiting for me tomorrow at the post office. So this, Lord willing and the creeks don't rise, will be the last episode of Tent Talks Tunes with the infamous $19 camera. I've graduated to a $70 camera, and I pick it up tomorrow, and when I do this again in 167 hours, that's 167 hours, we'll have a much better camera with autofocus, and you can see really cool things like this very well-worn 1908 United States dime that my mom sent me. I remember this from when I was a kid. My love of coin collecting stems back in no small part to the fact that my grandma had a cedar chest. And in it, she had all kinds of really cool artifacts from her childhood, including the Confederate money that her great-grandfather, I think it was her great-grandfather, saved. He fought for the state of Georgia in the war between the states, and he had his Confederate money saved, and she would show me the money, and she had old U.S. coins, and I was just enthralled by that. And this very, very worn-out 1908 Barber Dime was one of them. And this thing is so worn out, there's basically... you can't see how thin it is. This gives definition to the word one thin dime. So I just love this kind of stuff. And thanks, Mom. This will be part of my permanent cabinet forever. Let's see, what else did we get in the mail? Oh, well, a postcard from my main dog, Dylan Hauser, a.k.a. Hell Garbage. Another one of his extremely cryptic postcards. It says Spiral Tanks on it. Can only guess what that means. But he got my address and he sent it to me. Thank you. This is really cool. I love when I get the latest issue of the Bridge and Tunnel Crowd. This is one of the most bizarre magazines you will ever hope to see. It comes out of New Haven, Connecticut. And these guys are way, way, way out there beyond left field. They're in the bleachers somewhere. This is really awesome mix of history, politics, art, music, and it's all from this extremely eccentric point of view. Very, very dry humor. And I like that. So, Bridge and Tunnel Crowd. Got the latest issue right here, and I actually have a few extra ones. If you send me something, I'll send you one of these in return. That's what I call fair trade. This is worth reading. I love Bridge and Tunnel Crowd. I'm also extremely excited to report that I got in the mail from one of my favorite record moguls, Dennis Highland in Mobile, Alabama, the brand new, hot off the presses, Anti-Scene Before I Hang split 10-inch record. Oh man, you can see by the t-shirt I'm wearing I have certain loyalties to a certain band I'm in, the almighty Anti-Scene. This is our latest release. There's only 500 made, and most of them went to Japan, because the label that it's on, Jackhammer Records, is based in Japan. So I think the ratio is 400 went to Japan, 50 went to Before I Hang, and 50 went to Anti-Scene. And I got my copy in the mail, so I'm stoked. And I just love the fact that the ad for it is in Japanese. How cool is that? It's an official Japanese release. And I am just like chuffed, dead chuffed to be a part of this. Can't really see, but it's on this really cool translucent purple vinyl. A badge of honor for yours truly. I've been making records for 36 years now, and this is yet another gem in the crown. So thanks to the guys at Jackhammer Records, Dennis specifically. That's how much I love it. I just throw it all over the goddamn place. They used to say unbreakable, and look at that. It is unbreakable. So everybody happy. Let's talk about books, shall we? Books. Books are good. Literacy is cool. As the old public service announcements on TV used to say when I was a kid, reading is fundamental. I do like to read. I've always had a bug for literacy, whether it was Marvel Comics or the daily newspaper, or when I got to be about 13 years old, when I actually went to the bookstore, a place called Walden Books in the Westland Mall in Hialeah, Florida, and purchased my very first ever rock and roll book. And I've showed this to you, everybody, before. The Rolling Stones illustrated record by Roy Carr. And I also take great delight in showing you just how much. That used to be the spine. That's not the front of the book. That's the front of the book. This is the spine. There is nothing left of this book in terms of binding, because I've had this since 1978, and I've read it and reread it and literally just about worn it out. This book showed me what a rock and roll biography, discography, analysis could be. Roy Carr writes fantastically about the Rolling Stones. He goes into depth. He covers obscure and arcane areas of the story. It's got a day-by-day history of the band, complete record reviews, awesome photos, very knowledgeably written, very simply written, very effectively written. And by the time I got that book, I had already read Lord of the Rings, and when I was a kid, I had the Great Brain series, which was just one of the best series of kids books ever written. So I'd already written, or I should say read a lot of books, but that was my first rock and roll book. And that totally sharpened the sigh for me to start going out there and wielding through the piles and scads and heaps and stacks of books out there relating to that thing we call rock and roll. So there were a number of rock and roll books I got after that one, but the first one to come down the pike that has stuck with me ever since the day I bought it is one that I bought sometime around 1985, and I still got it to this day, and it's a really, really, really good book. Before I talk about that one, I'm going to scroll down just a smidge here. I'm going to show you a good close-up of my Anti-Scene shirt. And see how the comments are stacking up. Oh yeah, there's Janice. Hello Janice. And Ray. Hello Ray. Glad to see you guys tuning in and talking about literacy in books. Yeah, this is a book I bought in 1984, and this is still to this day one of my very favorite rock and roll books. Uptight, The Velvet Underground Story by Victor Bockris and Gerard Malanga. When I bought this book, the Velvet Underground was a very mysterious phenomenon. And you got to remember, we're talking pre-internet here. To try to find out information about a band whose entire catalog really was out of print. And, yeah, I mean, you just couldn't find the stuff. The 3 essential records, the Velvet Underground and Nico, White Light, White Heat, and the self-titled album, were all completely out of print. You could see loaded around occasionally at the more well-stocked record stores, and you could see live at Max's or maybe Live 1969, also occasionally at some of the, more intelligent record stores, but not that often, and never the first 3 albums. But meanwhile, there's this buzz about the Velvet Underground. Like, all the people who knew their music would talk about the Velvet Underground. Or, occasionally show me, hey, look, I got this Velvet Underground record. And I was like, wow. It was kind of like being at the Sistine Chapel and looking up at this painting. It was essential, it was beautiful, it was art, but it was unattainable, it was unapproachable. And any information about the Velvet Underground was impossible to find. You couldn't just click on Wikipedia and get your standard Wikipedia by the numbers entry, the very dry, formulaic, early career, middle career, end, death, whatever, with the footnotes and whatnot. You had to maybe stumble across a reference or an old article in an old magazine, like Cream Magazine or Rock Scene. If you could find back issues of that anywhere, maybe there'd be something about the Velvet Underground in it. Information was extremely hard to find, but the reputation of this group was it was beyond mythical. It was like mystical almost, because the people who talked about the Velvet Underground were people who, at least I really respected and really admired, and who I if they said the Velvets were important, I believed them. And when my friend Tim Powell, sometime around 1982, let me borrow his copy of the Velvet Underground and Nico, and he gave me a piece of advice. He said, start with side 2. The first song on side 2 is a song called Heroin. It doesn't grow on you, it grows in you. And Tim Powell knew his stuff. Tim Powell knew what he was talking about. So when he said it, I believed it. So he let me borrow his copy of the Velvet Underground and Nico, aka the Banana record. And this was like really something. This was a rare commodity. So I took it home, dropped the needle on the groove, and the record had that beautiful purple Verve label on it. And the Banana was still on the front cover of his, and all the bad reviews were on the inside. And I was already kind of hooked by that. And I played it, and from the second I heard that strummed guitar and the mysterious tapping drum, and then the drone viola came in, oh man, I still get goosebumps. You can't see the goosebumps because my camera's so cheap, but they're there. That's what the Velvet Underground did to me. So I was hooked immediately. I needed more. And I wanted to know everything there was to know about the Velvet Underground. I wanted to know it all. I wanted to know who these people were, where'd they come from, what was their story, how was this record made, what's the deal? I've never heard music like this before. This is like something being handed down from a cloud above. I need to know more. And of course, at that time, there just wasn't any information. Nothing. Even the cool people like Tim Powell, they didn't really know much about the Velvet Underground. So when this book came out in 1984, finally, it was like a bolt from the blue. Like, all of a sudden, there's an entire book about this band that I only had this somewhat, like, no knowledge of whatsoever. The closest thing that I had to any kind of knowledge about the Velvet Underground came from a guy named M.C. Caustic, Michael Caustic. And he was the guy who headed up this organization called the Velvet Underground Appreciation Society. And MC Caustic, I think more than any other human being on this planet, kept the torch of the Velvet Underground burning at a time when, you know, the records were out of print and you didn't know anything about the Velvets, you know? MC Caustic kept it going, and MC Caustic had a really cool zine called What Goes On. And because of the auspices of the local independent record store, Open Books and Records in my case, I was actually able to get my hands on a copy of What Goes On, issue number 3. And it was a fanzine, so it wasn't like a biography or a history, but it had a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of nuggets, a lot of tidbits, a lot of teasers about the story of the Velvet Underground, and just a little bit of eye-opening on their mystique. And that was another publication that just about wore out, you know, and I've still got it in a box somewhere. I need to dig it up. But this copy of What Goes On number 3 kept me going for a long time, and it really, really was a piquant thing. It just piqued my interest even more to find out what the hell was going on with these people and this astonishing music that they made with no knowledge whatsoever about them. So this book finally came out, and wouldn't you know, it's a damn good book. It was written by Gerard Malanga, who was a key member of the Andy Warhol's Factory. Victor Bockris was there at the time, and it's written the way that I like a book to be written. They interview everybody. You don't just get the official narrative. You know, like everybody knows what Lou Reed has to say about the Velvet Underground. Everybody knows what, you know, if you're really into it, you can find out what John Cale has to say about the Velvet Underground. Everybody knows now, you know, all the cliches and the thumbnail sketch and the Wikipedia version. But Bockris and Malanga interviewed everybody. You have as much, if not more, ink from Sterling Morrison and Maureen Tucker as you do Lou Reed and John Cale. And you've got narratives from the people who were at the factory and people who saw them live. And you even get a lot of ink from Steve Sesnick, their much, much hated manager. After Andy Warhol had them, Steve Sesnick was the guy who managed them. And you get him on record talking about the Velvet Underground. This is the only place I've ever seen anything from Steve Sesnick where he tells his side of the story. So it's a remarkably balanced and well-written and pretty much comprehensive book about the Velvet Underground. I haven't found one yet in 35 years. It's better than this one. So I'm not a compensated endorser. I get no money from this. I'm just telling it like it is. This is the best VU book I've ever seen. And I did wear out my first copy of it. This is the actual copy I bought in 1985. Wore out the first one. I got this one sometime in the early 90s, and I still have it. And I've made a point of not wearing this one out. So, real good book, and a big salute to MC Caustic for flying the flag when nobody was around to salute it. And then for Gerard Malanga and Victor Bockris to finally actually write the book that has stood as the testament for the last 35 years. One of my favorite rock and roll books ever. Yeah! Don't know when you guys are watching this, or if you're watching this on YouTube sometime in the distant future, or on Facebook sometime in the distant future. But as I'm going out here live, it is mid-December in Connecticut, and the air is dry. So my larynx is kind of parched. So I hope you guys will bear with me while I hydrate a little bit. I found it to be a very good idea to stay hydrated. One of my trademarks in life is my big gallon jug of water. I try to drink a gallon of water every day, and it serves me very well. Hence the presence of the sippy cup while I'm on, because nobody wants to see a gallon of water floating around all over the place on the camera, but a sippy cup is visually appealing. Think about that, all you TV people, all you webcasters and vloggers and whatnot. You got to keep your eye on details like this. All right, another one of my very favorite rock and roll books, one that I got the day it came out, And I'm going to hold it up to the camera while I reach over and see how the scrolling's going on and who's tuned in. This one right here. Henry Rollins, Get in the Van. Oh, yes. I just scrolled down to see my main man, Gary Forney from Iowa, tuned in. Gary Forney is one of my very favorite, as they say, outsider artists. And I've released stuff by him on my label, TPOS. TPOS. I recommend that you check it out. Hello, Gary. This book is great. This book is awesome. I've always had the yen to travel. Ever since I was a wee little lad, I've always loved traveling and going places. And to me, anywhere outside of where I live is exotic and foreign and wonderful. To me, Gatlinburg, Tennessee is as good as Rome, Italy. You know, Columbus, Ohio is just as good as London, England. It's somewhere that's different from where I am. It's got a different feel, a different flavor, different people, different architecture. It doesn't matter where on the globe it is. If it's different, I'm intrigued by it. And I'm probably going to like it, you know? So when Rollins came out with this compendium of his writings that are all about touring with Black Flag, I was all about it because I love travelogues and I love reading about these places. Like, let's take a look at a typical Henry Rollins entry. June 7th, 1985, Memphis, Tennessee. You know, June 5th, 85, Lafayette, Louisiana. June 8th, Nashville, Tennessee. And just like all these places, you know, and the fact that Rollins was going all these places while touring with a band just really made me salivate, you know, because touring is the best. Traveling is awesome, but traveling with your music, with your band, and playing music in different places, there really isn't anything better at all. And so when Rollins came out with this book, I hadn't done a whole lot of touring. I'd been on a couple of short little tours with my band Broken Talent. Like the first time we went as far as Raleigh, North Carolina and back. And it took about a week. And we only played like 3 shows. But man, I was hooked. I was hooked on touring. I was hooked on playing music live in places that I had never been before. And looking out and seeing different people in the audience. And waking up somewhere that wasn't my bedroom in my mom's house. You know, it was just really amazing being out there in the world with music as the catalyst. The second time we toured, it was up to Albany, New York and back, with many points in between, and it almost killed us, but it didn't. And it simply made me want to go out even more and just do it even more. So that didn't happen for a bunch of years afterwards. I'm a touring machine now, when circumstances permit, of course. But in the meantime, Rollins had his book of tour diaries about touring with Black Flag, a band who are just right there at the toppermost of the poppermost as far as I'm concerned. One of my top 3 favorite bands of all time, permanently, that never changes. My top 3 are permanent. Black Flag is one of them. So, kind of the same deal with the other 2 books I talked about. I read this book from cover to cover, stem to stern, ship to shore, top to bottom, devoured every word in this book, and just thought about the reality of being a band playing in places like Lafayette, Louisiana, and Memphis, Tennessee, and Des Moines, Iowa, and San Francisco, California, and just wanting to be there, you know, wanting to have that experience, just wanting to be a part of it and live it on my own. And Rollins captures it. He really captures it. And this is one of those books I can just pick up and randomly open to a page and put on my dollar store glasses and start reading. I can just start reading and I'm hooked. I am totally hooked. And one thing will lead to another. Like I'll read parts of this book and it'll make me think, oh yeah, I've got a tape of this show. And I'll go out and drag out the tape and play the tape of Black Flag, playing the very concert that he's talking about. And then I'll think about a story that somebody else told in another book about Black Flag and get their perspective on the story. And it's just like this labyrinth that I get to follow and get this entire history, this entire picture. And it ends up being very colorful and very deep with all the shading and the shadowing and the actual sounds of the music that they're talking about. Fantastic. Short of going out there and doing it myself, it's the best. And the one thing I've noticed, it took me a while to finally glom onto the fact, and it was after I started touring on my own, as a solo acoustic dude with my acoustic guitar, and with the almighty anti-scene in my band's Ultra Bunny, and when I do my Fried Man noise project, I didn't really understand how unique Rollins' situation with Black Flag was when it came to touring. Because when I tour, I have a great time. I have fun. And almost everybody I know who tours also has fun. I mean, it's like, what's not to love? You drive to a new town, you see the sights, you meet new people. I hit all the record stores. If you have time, you go to like parks and museums, good restaurants. You go to a venue, you play your music, sell merch, get paid, go sleep at someone's house usually, and wake up and you're in somebody's house with its own decor and its own atmosphere and its own feel. It's the best. And then you just repeat over and over and over again until it's time to go home. It's awesome. It is so much fun. Not for Rollins, and not for Black Flag. For them, touring was like an endless pit of misery and psychodrama and just agony. It's amazing now to read this book again, now that I've gotten a few million miles under my belt, and I've been to many of the cities he talks about. When I open this book and I see, let's find a city here, Syracuse, New York, and Amherst, Mass, and Knoxville, Tennessee, I'm like, oh yeah, right on, Syracuse. Awesome record store. Great record show in Syracuse. I love that. Amherst, man, what a fun time I had at the record show in Amherst. And oh man, what a great gig I played at the Student Union there. And oh, Nashville, man, Nashville was a lot of fun. I had the best vegan, pot roast in Nashville. It's like, that's what I think about when I see this book. When you read Rollins' account, it's nothing but splitting headaches and band tensions and fights, and it's just like, wow. The Black Flag experience really was not anything like the way I experience it. And it makes you appreciate what an incredibly bizarre set of personalities and circumstances there were in this band. And reading the other great Black Flag biography, which, if I recall correctly, is called Spray Paint the Walls. That's how good my memory is. It tells everybody else's side of the Black Flag story. And it's got a lot of the same tensions and the fraught behaviors and whatnot, but it's not quite as unrelentingly grim as it was from Henry's perspective. And as I have reached my ripe old age, I don't share that perspective at all. I could definitely relate to it when I was Henry's age. Absolutely, I keyed right into it. Now I look at it as more like a sociological study, and still a hell of a collection of great stories, and an absolutely priceless time capsule of a place and a time and a type of music and a scene. Really, really good stuff. So another one of my very favorite rock and roll books. To Henry for having the foresight to write it all down and the guts to publish it, because there's some intensely personal shit in there that I don't think anybody else in the world would ever write about and publish for just anybody to read. It takes a lot of cojones to do that. Cojones! Let's drink to the cojones it took to write that book. Yes, Joseph Charles, hello. Got some pithy remarks from Joseph Charles. I can't really read them because my glasses aren't on. And I could put them on, but I'm not going to break the flow. I'll deal with you later, Joseph Charles. And we're about halfway through the episode, so it's time for me to toot my own horn. I got a book. It's called Women of Devo. And it's a book of photography. Some of my favorite things in the world are Devo and the human female form. I love them. I also love weird lighting, and I love weird situations. And I love to take pictures of cool, interesting women in bizarre lighting situations. And I love putting captions to the photos, all of which involve Devo. So if you're like me and you like Devo, and you like the female form, and you like punnery, and you want to support an artist like myself, I suggest that you purchase a copy of The Women of Devo. I make them in micro editions of 25 copies each. They cost $20. It's $20 post-paid from me. PayPal, mt@malcolmtent.net. Or just send me cold hard cash to the address I've talked about before. P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. I'll sign the darn thing. Women of Devo. Third printing. 25 copies. $20 from me. That's the commercial. Let's continue onward, shall we? Another one of my favorite books is actually kind of becomes two of my favorite books. The Clash. Out of Control, The Last Days of the Clash. Written by Vince White. Now you might wonder, who is Vince White and why is he writing about the last days of the Clash? I mean, everybody knows the story of the last days of the Clash, right? You know, they put out Combat Rock. They threw Topper Headon out of the band. They played the US Festival, and, well, that was the end of it. You know, that was the last days of the Clash, right? Wrong! 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 That's the official version. And that's why I love books like this. The real version, the real story of the Clash, is that after Mick Jones got tossed out, they continued onward with two new guys, one of whom was Vince White. And I really hate official versions, man. I really, really do. Because if you read, you know, almost any authorized biography of the Clash or the Wikipedia entry or whatever, it's like, you know, the Clash, you know, 1976 to 1983, throughout Mick Jones, continued onward with two new guys, and then broke up 2 years later. And that's it. That's all you get, if you get anything at all, you know? Continued onward for a couple of years, and then broke up. And that's it. Well, goddamn, during those 2 years, that band toured the world. They played dozens of shows to thousands and thousands of people. They recorded an album. They recorded a single. They recorded demos. They rehearsed. There were intra-band relationships and politics and stories. There were relationships with the fans. They left behind a wake of posters, photos, audio recordings. Shit happened for a solid 2 years and on a very big scale. But according to the official version that you'll find on Amazon.com, it's not important. It's not relevant to the story. It's not important. It just, you know, what's important is Mick, Paul, Topper, and Joe. That's what's important. That's what we're going to sell you. Okay, never, you know, what, something else happened, whatever. It wasn't important. It's just a footnote. I say, fuck that. The footnote is quite often the most interesting part of the story. And this book by Vince White illustrates. This is a self-published book, or it's on a small imprint out of England. I actually had to send away to England to get this book. There is an entire story of the Clash that goes on for 2 years past the official narrative, and it's fascinating. I mean, there is so much story involved with it, and so much personality involved with it, and you're just not going to hear this point of view or this history hardly anywhere else. There are a couple of good Clash biographies that do talk about this period of the band. They get a chapter or two. But this is the only book I've ever seen that has in-depth stories from an absolutely unique perspective. I love hearing the stories told by the guys and the gals that nobody interviews. We already know what Joe Strummer has to say about the Clash. Alright? You can turn on VH1 and hear what fucking, what's his name, Dave Grohl has to say about the Clash. Alright, we already know what the official spokesmen are going to say about the Clash. But what about the guy who was on stage with Joe Strummer and Paul Simonon? He was there. He played the shows. He was in the studio. He was at the band meetings. He was there, and he's got a story to tell, and it's here, and I love it. I've read it. It's valid, it's valuable, it's funny, it's tragic. It's an entire piece of history that never really gets talked about that much. Thank God for the book, because the book is here. It's in black and white. There's even pictures. Look at that. There's a picture of that version of the Clash. You can find him if you look hard enough, but no one's going to write about it. Love this book. It's a perspective you don't get anywhere else, and that to me is very important. Same reason why this next book is important. Man, have I got to take a sip of water. We all know I love Black Sabbath. And this is an awesome tome. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, The Battle for Black Sabbath. This talks a lot. And you can see how much it talks. That's a big, thick book. A lot of pages. About an entire history of Black Sabbath that is a footnote of the history. The official history. The official history is Black Sabbath, 1970 to 1978. Ozzy Osbourne left the band after Never Say Die. They continued for 2 albums with Ronnie James Dio. And then Ozzy rejoined the band in 1997, and they've had a very successful career ever since. And that's it. That's all you get. Well, guess what? Black Sabbath never stopped. There's an entire period of the band, even with some of the Dio years in the middle, that no one even acknowledges. You know, Tony Martin from Birmingham, England, was Black Sabbath's lead singer for 10 years. From 1987 until like 1996. And recorded how many albums? Headless Cross, Tear, Forbidden, Cross Purposes, The Eternal Idol, Headless Cross Live. 6 albums with Black Sabbath that are not part of the official narrative. That's like what I said about earlier with that Clash book by Vince White. We're talking about 6 albums, hundreds of concerts, all over the world, played to tens of thousands of people, and there's a story behind every bit of that. But because it's not Ozzy, or to a lesser extent Dio, it's not important. It didn't, just don't worry about that. Here, buy this deluxe reissue of Paranoid for the 57th goddamn time. Like you haven't heard Paranoid enough. Of course, Paranoid's awesome, but we already know about Paranoid. We already know about Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. We already know about all that. What do you know about Cross Purposes, And the story behind it, the creation of it. The personalities behind it, the politics behind it. It's a valid work of art, as are all of those albums. And the people who created these albums are all artists and musicians, and they exist, and they are valid, and they have stories. And this entire book by Gary Sharp Young focuses on that period. Not only of Black Sabbath, but also, interestingly enough, of Ozzy Osbourne. And I, for one, okay, love Ozzy, whatever. I'm sick to death of the official Ozzy Osbourne story. This book, besides telling the very undertold story of that period of Black Sabbath, goes very deeply into detail about the Ozzy bands and the people who actually wrote the songs and produced the albums. You never hear their stories. They're in this book. I love that. This book is a fascinating account of the music business as well. If you want to know about any trap you could possibly fall into in the music business, read this one. It's something else, man. This is a real cautionary tutorial for anybody who wants to get involved in the music business. It's all here. Oh, Lord have mercy. This is just great. I love seeing that. Open the book randomly. We got a picture of Jeff Nichols and Glenn Hughes, two key players in the story of Black Sabbath. Jeff Nichols especially, who has never gotten his due as a creator and a contributor to Black Sabbath. And we can argue all day and all night. I'm not gonna. Over whether it is Black Sabbath without Ozzy Osbourne, whether it isn't. I think it doesn't matter. It is what it is at a given moment because of any number of circumstances that are beyond our control and actually beyond the control of many of the players. If anything, if there's any impression you get about Tony Iommi from this book, is that the guy was completely hapless. He was just like totally buffeted about by circumstances that he had no control over and decisions he had no say in whatsoever, but somehow managed to keep the name Black Sabbath alive and the band Black Sabbath valid for 10 years. Until Ozzy Osbourne could rejoin the band and they could churn out that turgid piece of garbage album called 13, which is nothing but boring rewrites of old Black Sabbath songs anyway. And of course it went to number 1. Of course. Because nostalgia is a cheap and easy sell. And trying to craft something new and original from scratch, like Headless Cross or Tear, is not valued as much as cheap nostalgia. I said it. I stand by it. Some of you agree with me. Some of you don't. If you disagree, I strongly recommend that you get yourself a $19 camera. These things are invaluable if you want to go spout your opinion. My God, 19 bucks. Hook it up to your computer and start vlogging, dude. Awesome. Great fun. This is really a lot of fun, I must say. Cheers to all of you who've tuned in and have comments to make. I love you all. Got one more book to talk about. And this is another book that I love because it's also chock full of those alternate viewpoints. And it's very much an on-the-ground, on-the-scene, in-the-moment account of one of my favorite bands ever. And this book is damn near impossible to find. I got this one, I've only ever seen, really, this one copy in the wild ever. Or actually I found 2 copies of it at one time, many years ago, in the remainder bin of a local bookstore in Brookfield, Connecticut that's long since gone out of business. I think I paid $1.99 for it. But this book is wonderful. This book needs to be reissued. I'm talking about Billion Dollar Baby by Bob Greene. That's the back cover. Bob Greene is one of my favorite newspaper writers. He had a column in Chicago for many years. He's one of those dudes who goes out and just talks to people, talks to real people in real situations, and brings their lives to life. for lack of a better term, he gets those nuances and those details and those poignant bits that makes every single human being unique and makes their situations worth reading about. And so he ended up following, or actually being a part of, the Alice Cooper tour of 1973 for the Muscle of Love album. And even though, of course, it's marketing, you got to have Bob Green on the back with the lead singer of the band, a guy named Alice Cooper. It's all about the group Alice Cooper. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, let me help you. Okay, here's a very, very, very important point to make. And I like to make this point as often as is appropriate and as is necessary. Alice Cooper originally was a group of 5 individuals: Glenn Buxton, Neil Smith, Michael Bruce, Vincent Furnier, and Dennis Dunaway. Those 5 guys were in a band, and the name of the band was Alice Cooper. Okay? The Alice Cooper solo artist came later. And the official history would have it that the lead singer, Alice Cooper, was a solo guy who has had various bands throughout the years, and they were interchangeable, and they came and went. But the star of the show, this guy named Alice Cooper, is the one who matters. Once again, I have to call bullshit on that. I really do. Because the original 5-piece Alice Cooper is what made Vincent Furnier a solo star. The entire concept was the product of these 5 guys, especially Dennis Dunaway and Vincent Furnier. Those 2 guys are the ones who really came up with the entire idea of Alice Cooper. Okay? And the 5 guys in the band are the ones who brought it to life and made it real. It was a culmination of 5 creative personalities who made this thing that we now know as Alice Cooper. Okay, I just want to make sure that we all understand why I love this book so much, because it tells the story of the 5 guys. And it's critical because when Bob Green joined the touring party, the band was in the process of falling apart. And they all kind of knew it. So it's a really interesting and unique and priceless snapshot of a band's history. Not just the lead singer Alice Cooper's history, but a critically important rock and roll band. They're falling apart, and Bob Green just happens to be there to document it. And his style, it's that man in the street style, that slice of life, verate style, that newspaper reporter's eye for detail with a very human touch, is what makes this book so great. Not to mention the fact that Michael Bruce and Dennis Dunaway and Neil Smith all, for once, have a chance to have their say in real time. And Shep Gordon is in there, and the road manager Dave Liebert is in there. Everybody's in there, and everybody gets to talk about the entire big picture. It's not just the VH1 version of the solo guy, Alice Cooper. It's the band. And all of the people who travel in a tour to make a tour possible and make a band a band. And it ties into my love of touring and being on the road. The mechanics of staging a rock and roll show. I love that stuff. I love standing backstage and seeing all the stuff like the lights and the rigging and the seating and the PA. I love sound checks. I really do. I love rehearsals. This stuff is enchanting to me. And this extremely out-of-print book really, really captures it. I love that book. And I'm going to show you guys something that's extremely special to me. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to sign off. I've got just a few more minutes left in me. I'm going to tell you a story about Dennis Dunaway, who is probably my favorite member of the Alice Cooper group. Excuse me. Kind of nice and close up and intimate here. I like this approach. I'm going to stick with you guys for a minute. Hope you don't mind my face being right in yours, but I want to tell the story in like a kind of low-key, quiet fashion. When I had my store Trash American Style, I would always play music in the store that was good for retail. You know, like rockin', upbeat, kick-ass music that people would want to hear and would make them feel good. And I played a lot of Alice Cooper in the store, the solo stuff, but mostly the band stuff. And one day I was playing some Cooper, and this young lady was listening, and she said, "Who is this?" I said, "This is Alice Cooper." And she said, "Oh, wow, yeah, Alice Cooper. You know, the guy I work for used to be in one of his bands." I said, "Yeah? What was his name?" And I was expecting to hear the name of, you know, one of those sidemen, you know. And she said, "Oh, his name is Dennis." And I said, "Dennis Dunaway?" She said, "Yeah, Dennis Dunaway. I work for him at a video store down in Stamford." And I was like, "You have got to be kidding me." Dennis Dunaway, with the guy with the long brown hair down past his waist and the mirrored bass, and the guy who wrote Black Juju and co-wrote School's Out and $1 Billion Babies and Muscle, like that guy? Yeah, he's the manager at this video store I work for down in Stamford. I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Really?" She said, yeah. And he likes to tell us sometimes stories about the old days with the Alice Cooper band, and he kind of feels neglected sometimes, and I love hearing the stories. And I was like, "Dude, do you think that if I went down there, and do you think he would talk to me?" She said, "Oh yeah, he'd probably like it. He'd probably like it a lot." And I was like, "All right, gotta do this. I've got to do this." So I mulled it over. The young lady, her name was Tracy, told me when he would be there, and I resolved to go down to Stamford to this video store, Captain Video, and visit Dennis Dunaway. And it took me a few weeks to work up my nerve to do it, because I'm not the kind of guy just, if I see Dennis Dunaway at a video store, for example, I'm not going to go up and like, "Hi guy, I'm a big fan." I'm not good at that. But this was important. I had to do this. So I told my friend Greg Schmidt, who co-promotes the Danbury Record Show with me, and also is a huge Cooper fan, that I wanted to go down there and meet Dennis. He said, "Could I come along?" I said, "Please do. It'll give me a little more courage to do this, a little more confidence." So we picked a day, Saturday afternoon. I arranged to have someone cover for me at Trash American Style so I could actually get out, because it's very hard to get out of the store when you're the owner, There's always stuff to do. I got covered, and Greg met me at Trash, and we went down to Stamford to meet Dennis Dunaway. Wow. So it's about an hour drive to Stamford from Danbury. And the whole time, me and Greg are just marking out. Like, we can't believe we're going to theoretically meet this guy, and is he going to be friendly? It's like we didn't know what to expect. And I, had some stuff I was hoping to get signed and everything, and, Greg had some stuff, and all right, we get down to Stamford, and we find the address on, I forget, High Ridge Road, I think it was, whatever the main drag is in Stamford, Captain Video. Walk in, it's a video store in the 90s, and in the back, there's the returns counter, and there's a guy sitting there processing videos. And he's got short hair. He's wearing a shirt and a tie. But I look and it's like, oh my God. It's Dennis Dunaway. The guy who... He was original Alice Cooper. Oh my God. And he's just sitting there checking in videos. Well. And all these housewives are in the store looking at you know, uh, Thomas the Train VHSs or whatever, Sesame Street videos, Disney videos, and they're going to, rent the videos, and the guy processing their videos is the dude who helped pull the lever on the hangman's noose when they hung Vincent Furnier. Same guy. I am just absolutely gobsmacked at this point. It's just surreal is what it is. So, me and Greg take a couple spins around the video store, playing it cool, like, hi, we're here to browse videos. And finally, I just, like, bit my knuckle and walked to the back. And, the guy's sitting there just checking the videos, and I go up to him and I said, excuse me. He looks up and says, yes. I said, are you the infamous Dennis Dunaway? And I just remember clearly he kind of stopped what he was doing and smiled and said, why, yes, I am. And, for the next, whatever, hour or so, in between his duties as video store manager, he hung out with me and Greg, told us stories, answered questions, was just the most gracious host. It was just so full of stories. We could have spent hours there. It was just mind-blowing. And of course, in the days before, cell phones and pocket cameras and whatnot, we didn't have, no real way to take pictures or anything like that. But, man, we hung out with Dennis Dunaway for a while at his video store. And I brought my copy of $1 Billion Baby, along with a few other things. And Dennis Dunaway himself... Wow, I forgot I had this. Excuse me, we'll get to that in a minute. Dennis Dunaway, with a red pen that he had, very kindly autographed my copy of $1 Billion Baby, which made my day, and in a lot of ways maybe even made my life, because it was just so damn cool. And then later, I was able to get signatures from Alice Cooper himself, and Neil Smith, and Michael Bruce. So besides being a very rare out-of-print book, and a darn good read, my copy is autographed by the 4 surviving members of the Alice Cooper group. And I want to take a minute to give a big shout out to Dennis Dunaway, the unsung hero of the group. He's also got a book out, which is an essential read if you like that group and that history and all that. I got to see Dennis Dunaway, Neil Smith, Michael Bruce, and my main dog Rick Tedesco play a set at Rick's guitar shop called Guitar Hanger. And they were warming up for the Alice Cooper group reunion shows in Europe. And watching them play and watching them interact with each other, it was very clear that Dennis Dunaway was the engine of that band. He was the driving force behind the original Alice Cooper group. So it made me respect the guy all that much more. And he actually has a pretty good voice in this book. And if you can ever find a copy of it, get it. If you love rock and roll bios and history, get it. I wish I had a copy to sell. I'd sell it, but I don't. This one's mine, baby. Mine. I, of course, do, just to reiterate, have copies of The Women of Devo to sell. Third printing, only 25 copies made of the third printing. That's my address, Malcolm Tent, P.O. Box 3626, Newtown, Connecticut, 06470. Along with my thoughtfully provided PayPal address if you want to get one directly from me. Mark Mothersbaugh sent me an email telling me how much he liked this book. Another life epiphany. It's pretty goddamn cool when the lead singer of Devo writes to the author telling him how much he liked the book. That's why you should own one. Just saying. And with that shameless commercial pitch, I'm done with this week's episode of Tent Talks Tunes. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble for an hour. I love an audience, and I love an audience who appreciates good music and history and all the fun stuff that makes rock and roll especially so special. So, I hope to be back in about 167 hours. During that interim, be sure to check me out on YouTube and Facebook. Send me a message. Let's talk. Let's have fun. Let's continue to rock and roll, because rock and roll is the best. This is Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Nutmeg State.